The 992 generation 911 Carrera T. Now, we've already done a launch video on this car over a year ago in California. However, now we're in Illinois where we actually get to live with this car, drive it on our favorite farm roads, and of course, do a deep dive in the shop. Now, before we do any of that, let's talk about the interior space very briefly. Now, what is the Carrera T from an interior perspective? Well, it's allowing you to option some of the more exclusive performance interior options at a much lower price point. Things like a back seat delete, and of course the carbon buckets. You can also option the Carrera T package, which this car does not have, and that's some unique styling features in the cabin to make this space feel a little bit more special and unique to this trim level. Now, if you've not seen all of our other million 911 videos, to quickly summarize the cabin space, the best thing about the 992 generation is it's found nearly the perfect balance between feeling like a special, purpose-built sports car and great day-to-day usability. So you've found a good balance between legacy physical controls and cleaning some of that up by putting some of the less used functions in the touchscreen. And this is a very, very good balance. The thing I really appreciate about this car is, unlike some of its competition in the sports car realm, things like the C8, the LC500, some of the BMW products, the C8 and the LC500 are good examples of cars that, while the interior space from a design perspective looks very forward, you sacrifice a lot in either interior storage or visibility. From a con perspective, the biggest complaints about this generation 911 are twofold. First off, styling. You could maybe argue the exterior and interior styling is a bit subdued and boring. I don't find it that way, but that's a personal preference. The other real con of the space is it's pay to play. Everything in this car is an option, and when you don't option things out, not from a fit and finish perspective, but from a materials choice perspective, it feels cheap. This car is in the mid $120,000 range. It has essentially no options. Because of that, you get a plastic dash, you get 2 iPhone speakers in the doors, you don't get a 360 camera, you have no driver assistance programs, a lot of things that you should expect at over $100,000 you don't get in this car. And when you option this thing out with a leather dash, more than 2-way adjustable seats, a decent audio system, some of the other interior creature comforts you may want, you're looking at a price at over $140,000 or over $150,000. This car very quickly becomes very, very expensive, but that's not new for Porsche. Their justification internally is that all of their cars are bespoke and they want your customer experience to reflect your priorities and your options. So it is up to you to decide what you get in your car. Nothing more and nothing less. So with that, let's head into the shop and put this thing up on the lift. It's that time. It's 911 time. So what do you need to know about this car? Well, let's talk about the name, Carrera T. No, it does not stand for testosterone or too much money, in Mark's words. It stands for touring. Now, the T or the touring models are supposed to harken back to a Porsche of yesteryear, but in reality, at least since the 991 generation 911, it's essentially the lowest price point special 911 you can buy. It takes the low and usable horsepower of the regular Carrera and mixes and matches it with performance options found on more expensive, more exclusive 911s with higher horsepowers. Now, if you want to learn everything there is to learn about the 992 generation 911, watch our 10 million other 911 pieces. Now, what's interesting about 911s, and we've talked about this before, is Porsche doesn't build a car to appeal to everybody. Because their buyers are so affluent on average, they are building models to specifically tailored to someone's needs. They aren't looking to build a car for everybody. That's why there are 10 million different Porsche models. So if you want that hardcore track car, you get a GT3 RS or GT3. Or if you want that runabout, you get a base Carrera. This is supposed to be that fun car that does everything well and has usable power. So let's start with the platform. This is built on MMB. It's their modular architecture. As I've mentioned many times in the past, it's the same platform that underpins things like the 718. Of course, this 911 992 generation. It's using their latest electromechanical systems and everything other than the GTE models. It's strut front, multi-link rear, and the joy of this is they can mix and match parts. So for this Carrera T, you get PASM Sport dampers as standard. They are optional on a Carrera S. They lower the car by 10 millimeters. They get more aggressive sway bars, and the spring rates go up dramatically. So in the front, compared to a regular PASM-equipped car, goes from 32 newtons per millimeter to 45, and in the back it goes from 72 to 145. That is a substantial increase. That's to improve directness and body control of this vehicle. You get base Carrera brakes standard, which of course are lower weight, and you get optional rear steer. I highly suggest you option it as it helps with initial turn-in, decreases the steering radius, and improves with high-speed stability. Now when it comes to differentials, you get two different options, either an E-diff when you get the PDK, which is their 8-speed, or you can get a mechanical diff like this car has with their 7-speed manual. It is very good. Yes, it has long gears, but I don't have a problem with it. It really does feel great to drive, and the pedal box is near perfect. Engine, this gets their highly modular 982 Evo engine. This is their 3-liter configuration. It can be scaled out from a base 2-liter found in a base Boxster all the way up to the 4-liter found in the now defunct GT4 and soon to be killed off GTS 4-liter. In the Carrera lineup, it's a 3-liter twin turbo engine, and in the base Carrera and this Carrera T, they share the same output. It's the high 300s. It has an integrated sump, and mechanically it's essentially the same as all the other 911 models. However, it gets slightly different turbochargers, and when you go up to the Carrera S and GTS, other than some software changes, they're essentially the same engine. Don't let that low horsepower number confuse you or fool you. It's actually a very, very fast car. We're going to talk about that during our drive. Past that though, I think it's time for us to go take this on our favorite farm roads.
You know, Jack, we were just talking about it. Talent doesn't equal success.
Unless you drive a Porsche, Mark, and then you're
right.
winning.
Is there launch control on this?
I have no idea. I don't believe in launch control. I believe in efficiency.
No, there's no launch control. Let's just do a conservative drive because I'm a conservative Porsche driver today.
You know, when you're in Sport Plus, Mark, oh yeah.
I'm trying to get max MPGs. Jack, you're trying to brake before me? What is this?
Now I know how it feels.
Take this jump. Oh! All right, well, we're going to go through a couple.
We've driven this already, Mark, but now we're on our farm roads.
Yeah, we've driven quite a few Porsches, I'll be honest.
So what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah, what do you think? I'm John Porsche. I want to hear your unbiased opinion on why this is the greatest car.
About this thing. I mean, I think everybody knows what I think. I get why people love this car because there's nothing else like it, but it is so tidy, it is so perfected, it is so smooth, and just lacks any raw emotion to it.
To me, and I've been raving to you all week about this car, I think the 992 generation 911 is the perfect all-around do-everything sports car.
It is. And you're going to tell me why.
It is just civilized enough that you can drive this around and feel like you're in a Honda Civic. It has no visual compromises. You have good visibility, great seating position, easy to use interior space. The suspension tuning is basically perfected sports car. It is just soft enough where you could drive it all day long on the highway and sit in traffic. And then when you're out here on your favorite back road, you can put it into Sport Plus or Sport or whatever it's called, tighten up the suspension. It doesn't bounce you off the road. The manual gearbox, it has a manual. I can't think of another high horsepower vehicle that allows you to have a manual gearbox in this price range that is this competent, other than like an Amira, which we haven't driven one yet, and it's less money than this.
Yeah.
I mean, the engine, it's really powerful. The 3-liter, I don't care what version you're in, makes more horsepower than advertised. This makes way more than 380 horsepower, at least it feels that way. It pulls hard to redline. It doesn't have fake engine noise. The brakes are a real brake pedal. They're hydraulic. The steering is, according to many engineers we've talked to now as well, the best EPS rack in any modern sports car. Like, it's perfect. It's just a lot of money by the time you option one out. And it's not exciting. Like, if you told somebody that I paid $150,000 for a fully loaded Carrera T or Carrera S, and you bought it over something like a brand new Z06, they're probably going to think you're boring.
I'd like to know how you make a car like this so remarkably unremarkable. I mean, this car is great in every metric, and I understand why it's great. I love driving it. I feel like it's just perfection in modern cars, but there's just something intangible about the fact that it is so sterile. I feel nothing. You know, and then I go to a salsa club with a bunch of Colombians,
yes,
and I dance all night. I'm like, yeah, let's get something spicy. And this car, because it is just so lacking something, I feel like I need to go on like a cocaine bender after driving it, just so, you know, I feel like I'm doing something. And I can't. It's one of the things about the modern Porsches, or Porsches for a long time, I've just never wrapped my head around.
I think because we get in and out of so many different cars now at this point, whenever I get back into a modern 911, and I feel that the 911, and I think now I agree with you, is a better car than the Cayman.
Yeah.
The cabin's nicer, it's easier to live with, the suspension's better. I don't care that it's bigger. I prefer driving it more of the time. And I think it does do everything better. I get in this car and I don't think about anything, and when I drive it on a back road, it trail bakes, it rotates through corners. When you have rear steer, it sort of helps deal with the fact that it's got struts in the front.
Yeah.
It makes great power, the brakes feel good, the steering's good. I just appreciate that it's so good at everything and I don't make excuses. And the telling point for me is, what car does every automotive executive secretly own that we meet?
Yeah, this car.
Everybody.
Everybody does.
Lexus, Toyota, Honda, Ford.
All the engineers.
All the engineers. Oh, what's your favorite car? Oh, 911.
I've been in the business designing and working on cars for 30 years, but I own a 911. I don't know if it's just an age thing. You're like, giving up on everything else. But I will say, then the positive side, obviously, it's a great car. I love the interior of this new car. I've said this before. I love its purpose. I love how clean it is, how functional it is. Everything works. Obviously, I'm not talking about the price of this car, the way it's spec'd out, but there is something special about mechanically feeling perfect on the outside, and then everything on the inside matches up. From the switchgear, I know where everything's at. I feel really connected to this car. I feel like there's no gimmicks in here. The visibility, it is a true sports car, classic car interior that is going to age exceptionally well. They've just perfected so many corners of this car, and I think because there are so little flaws, aside from maybe styling and all that, they found the perfect middle ground of making a car completely usable all the time with minimal sacrifice. And that's what I think I really love about this car.
I think if you prioritize theater above all else, you're better off in something, or like pure track.
Yeah.
You're better off in something like a Z06 or an Audi R8 with a V10 or something. But if you're just going to use it as your car, and I think I had this epiphany when I was sitting in a bad rainstorm last week with this thing. Like, oh, I don't care that I'm in this car. Or in every other vehicle in this price point or this performance level, I'm like, oh shit, I'm sitting in the rain, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
This is just a normal car most of the time, but unlike a C8, which is probably the worst offender of this, or like a modern BMW, it's not so good and so isolated at being a normal car in traffic that it strips away the feel part of what I love about cars. Yeah,
and that's a really good point, and that makes a lot of sense. And when I talk to Luke, our Porsche rep, you tend to see people that are really Porsche passionate get offended by a lot of the discussions when you start kind of nitpicking this car. But one of his biggest points was, look how many trim levels there are to this car. Mm-hmm. There's literally something for everybody. So the problems I have with a regular 911 are completely removed by, hey asshole, spend a little bit more money and get a GT product, and all the things that I'm complaining about this car go away. Yeah. So there is truth. If you look at the 911 trim levels, you can't even count them, how many there are variations. So if you have a problem with being a little bit more conservative, like on this car, don't worry about it. You can get something for you, and that's hard to say about a lot of cars.
As long as you have the money.
Well, right. I mean, we're talking about a Porsche product here. I mean,
it's a fair point. So, Mark, with that, I think it's time for us to head in the final thoughts, sir.
All right, let me rev this thing out one more time.
Final thoughts on the 911 Carrera T. Now, there are two different ways I'm going to look at this car. First, as a regular car enthusiast, and second, as a Porsche diehard. Let's start with the former first. The best thing about the 992 generation Carrera T, and really every Carrera, is it does nearly everything perfectly, and that's something we talked and beat to death in this video. It's a car that, unlike most of its competition, does excellently in the real world. You can sit in traffic, it's got good visibility, it rides well, and it's a car that feels normal when it needs to, and in those few instances you can actually have fun in your sports car, it does that exceptionally well because the inputs are great. It's got good steering, the engine feels special, doesn't have fake engine noise, and you can get it with a manual gearbox. And from a suspension tuning perspective, it finds that amazing balance of not beating you up while also not isolating you from all that road feel that you want in a car. Something things like the Audi R8, the AMG GTs, and BMWs, and even the Corvettes don't do that well. Most of the modern sports cars with all their electromechanical systems strip away a lot of the driving feel and replace it with ridiculous speed, which honestly most of the time you can't use in the real world anyway. What's the con of this car? Well, it's not that exciting to look at if you're not a Porsche person like me, and it is a very bad value from a performance perspective. Yes, this car, the Carrera T, is supposed to be this tremendous value, blending all the performance options. The reality is, once you option this car out the way you probably should, things like more than two-way adjustable seats, speakers that aren't horrible in the doors, a leather dash, an interesting-ish color, and rear steer, car is easily $140,000 or $150,000, which is a lot of money. It's more than things like a Z06 or a used R8. It is a lot of money, but it's great. And that's the truth about the 992. It's almost frustrating in that regards. Now, how about if you're a Porsche person, you love 911s, you're gonna buy one, you're deciding on this versus the Carrera S and the GTS. The honesty part is we've driven all of them, and unless you're driving them back to back on a racetrack, you really can't tell the difference. What it comes down to is, what do you need in your 911? Do you want it to be faster in a straight line and have better brakes for track use? You get an S or a GTS. Do you want it to cost less and theoretically have a little bit more of a cool factor? Then you get the T, and that's the joy of the 992 generation 911, is you can make it what you want it to be. The options that I think are the most important from a performance perspective are rear steer. I think the manual gearbox in this classic car is nearly non-existent, so you should get it as a manual, and some decent seats. So with that, thanks for watching, hope to see you soon.